Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are building our first Python API service. So we'll be using a framework called Flask, and it is commonly used to build small, lean API services with Python. So imagine that you are running your own tech company, a fintech company, and you have engaged a couple of customers who wish to pass you some information of a call option, let's say the volatility of a given stock or the price of a given stock. And what they want is for us to predict the expected call option price for that given stock. So they would have their own team of software engineers, they have their own services, and they wish to make requests to, let's say, a given API service. And they want our API service to return back the expected price of that stock. So today we'll be exploring how we can build our own API service. API is an acronym for Application Programming Interface, and like its name suggests, is used by other software to interface with our application. So with that, let's get started. For the first part of this series, I'll be exploring building the backbone of the Flask application. There will be no interfacing with databases yet, there is no data models defined yet, and there is not much spice in this video for now. But I'll be exploring how you can create a simple Flask object that represents the Flask application and how you can use that object to wrap methods such that they can be called when a user hits a given route. So that's a lot of words. Let's get started. So the first step would be to define the requirements of the project. Let's quickly do requirements.text and let's specify Flask. So at this point of recording, the latest version is Flask 2.2.2, so I'll be specifying that as the version. So the next step will be to define our virtual environment that contains all dependencies used by this project. So let's do virtual env. I'm using venv as the name of the virtual environment, and I am specifying the path to Python 3.9, which I'll be using as the interpreter for this project. So I'm going to deactivate it because I accidentally activated it before the recording of this video. But to activate that virtual environment again, specify the name of the virtual environment and call bin activate to reactivate this virtual environment. So if you take a look at your project directory, you can see that we have created a folder, and this folder pretty much contains all files we need to manage the virtual environment. So that's pretty much it. At this point, we have created our virtual environment. Now let's do a quick pip freeze to check our dependencies. So as you can expect, there's no dependencies at the moment because we just created it. So let's do pip3 install followed by the path to the text file to install all dependencies for this project. So if we do pip3 freeze, we can see that we have installed Flask along with other dependencies that Flask requires. So we're done. We're ready to start creating our first Flask application. Let's define main.py. This main.py Python file will define the entry point of this service. So let's import Flask. And now, as suggested by GitHub Copilot, we can use flask.flask. And this is pretty much the constructor to the Flask class. And this Flask class contains all the heavyweight methods we need to define a given backend Flask application. So we don't really need to know exactly how this works for now. We can just trust the abstraction and use the methods that is defined in this class to define the Flask application. So now that we've defined the app, the next step is to define the routes that dictate the behavior of this API service. So let's say if our users do get HTTP localhost 6000, that's the port, and let's say they want a call option price. Then if they hit this route, then we will return back the call option price of that given stock. So we can quickly do that by defining a function. Let's call this call option price. And this call option price currently, for the purpose of this first video, let's let this route not take in any data for now. And this call option price will return back, let's say, a dictionary. Let's make it define a dictionary of float for now. So let's do from typing import dictionary for the type hint over here, and we will make it return back a dictionary where it contains the call option price. So let's return back the call option price of Apple for now, and let it return back a fixed price of 100. So now that we define this method over here, this method is ready to be used to return back the call option price. But at this point, we have not registered this method under the Flask application. So the Flask application does not know that this method exists and which route should this logic be associated with. So what Flask provides are a couple of function wrappers that wraps each function to be executed if a user hits a given route. So if we do app.route followed by call option price, and we specify the methods that are allowed over here, in this case, we are allowing get, then if our users hit this route over here, we will return back the output like this. So that's pretty much how we can define our behavior for our Flask application. The next step will be to run this service. I am specifying the port to be 6000 so that the application runs on my local computer at port 6000. So we have just created our first API with just a few lines of code. Let's quickly spin up this application and test it out using an API client tester called Insomnia. So let's do python 3 main.py to spin up the application. And as you can see, the service is currently live on port 6000. Let's quickly open up Insomnia and let's hit call option price route over here. Let's call get. And as you can see, we have just returned back a dictionary. In this case, this is JSON really. And this contains the call option price of Apple, which we just hard-coded to 100. But I would say this video is a pretty decent example of how we can create a simple Python application with just a few lines of code. So I hope you like this. We'll be building on top of this to introduce other libraries to define data models and stuff. And we'll be showing how we can bring this to production with an actual model that works. So with that, that's it for this first video, and we will see you in the next one.